This is Duke University.
It is really a great pleasure to greet you all here today and to have this panel here. We're really honored to be able to do this today. This is a very important date for reasons Michèle will explain in a moment. But it's also a recognition of this really exciting kind of partnership and project that Duke is embarking on, having acquired the Radio Haiti Archives that Michèle has given to Duke. And I feel like I'm on a panel of sort of heroes and magicians. Michèle, of course, a hero of kind of the democratic movement in Haiti and of freedom of the press and struggling for rights in Haiti. Breaden, who's a magician, as we discovered this morning, is basically, and I actually wanted to call up this article here this is from the Nouvelliste in Haiti yesterday. A very nice title that we have in the newspaper here, which is Duke University gives voice back to Radio Haiti. Right? And so thanks to the technical work that the library is doing, these kind of voices are returning in a way. And so through audiovisual librarians able to do that. And Patrick Stawski, who's really the architect of this project, is a human rights archivist, making possible this donation as part of the project of Duke to really document human rights. And I think here what we'll be talking about today is that the documenting process is not simply a process of researching or archiving, but it's a way of contributing also to continuing evolutions and movements in human rights. And that's part of what's so exciting about this donation. I'm going to now donner la parole to Michèle, who will say a few words about Jean Dominique, who with her founded this radio station and is kind of one of the main voices in it.
Well, actually founded the radio station before I started working for the station. And I just want to say that this date is particularly meaningful to us. This is the 14th anniversary of the day Jean was assassinated. It happened in front of his radio station. We are still on the judicial front trying to find answers. And I will talk later about where the case is in terms of the justice system. But what I want to say that it is particularly meaningful for me because it's, I said it yesterday to friends around this table, to me it's giving new legs to the person I call a marathon soldier, Jean Dominique, who really for 40 years worked in making Radio Haiti what it was, and also worked for 40 years to help the democratic movement in Haiti to go from a dictatorship to a transition to democracy and to what we have today. He opened the space with Creole reporting. It was the first time there was information in Creole in a radio station. And I think it is very important that we honor him today.
Thank you. I wanted to actually begin today by having you talk a little bit about the history of Radio Haiti. So this radio station, how it was created, but also what role it played again as in the democratic movements in Haiti and the press in Haiti.
Well, it was first Jean Dominique who had been an agronomist in Haiti. He was working in the north of the country. He was after a guerrilla movement from his brother Philippe Dominique, who was killed working against attacking the regime in Port-au-Prince. Jean was arrested, and he spent 6 months in jail in Gonaïves, which is in the middle part of the country. And then he found himself, after that, an agronomist without a job. At the time, only the government hired agronomists, because it was a state occupation. So he found himself just trying to find a job. He went into teaching, then rented time on a radio station, Radio Haiti, which was then 30 years old, had been founded since 1935. And Radio Haiti was mostly an entertainment radio station. It was about music, mostly music. And you had DJs, but of course no information whatsoever. And Jean, in 1970, actually bought the station, and he started, first he installed a 10 kilowatt AM antenna, which means that his broadcasting could reach the rest of the country, all of Haiti. And that's when he started. Of course, it wasn't under dictatorship. It was first under François Duvalier. I was not in Haiti then. Then it was under Jean-Claude Duvalier, and it was a very slow process of being able to expand the limits of freedom of the press. At the beginning, we could only cover cultural matters, and that's why the first few tapes, some of them are here. The first few tapes of the 1960s, late 1960s, are about interviews with writers, interviews with artists of some sort, or they are about cultural issues because we couldn't talk about anything else. And we started talking about social issues later, and then again further we started talking about issues, political issues, but we only could do it, I would say, through proxy. Which means we would cover the Sandinistas entering Managua after the fall of Somoza, because to us it was one way of telling Haitians dictators do fall. And to us, we had thousands and thousands of people listening to what was happening in Managua. And we actually sent reporters to Managua to cover what was not our own problem, but it was the only way we could cover. And we covered elections in Jamaica, we covered elections in the Dominican Republic, just to show that elections are part of public life, are part of the democratic process. So then after that, slowly, we started covering issues that touched the government more directly. We started covering uprising in the Artibonite Valley against some of Duvalier's cronies, like Zachary Delva, who was a big tonton macoute at the time, who actually controlled the whole Artibonite region. And you had peasants, there were uprisings, which other stations did not talk about. Radio Haiti talked about that. We talked about the boat people being stranded in a Bahamian island called Cayo Lobos. We talked about different issues that were starting to come up. People were starting to actually move. The creation of labor unions, which had been forbidden under François Duvalier, the father, and started to grow. It took a lot of patience, a lot of self-censorship, because at the time, there were a number of things we could not say. In spite of all that self-censorship, in spite of, we were struck on November 28, 1980, the station was crushed, destroyed. And now Patrick and Craig have to deal with the results. Our tapes were left on the floor for 6 years, abandoned in the building of Radio Haiti. And now they are trying to restore those tapes and give them new lives. So I'm just linking this to the history of Radio Haiti. We came back from exile, Jean and I, in 1986, after the fall of Jean-Claude Duvalier. And we started rebuilding the station. Actually, it was done in an incredible way. People just bringing, market women bringing 20 cents, 50 cents, a good, to try to, because it was their radio station. It was the radio station that had given them a voice for so many years. So, and they had not forgotten after those 6 years. And the station was rebuilt with contributions from different people. And we worked in Haiti from 1990, and we have a very rich collection in those archives about those years, where we had Duvalierism without Duvalier. Duvalier had left, we had the army. And we had a number of issues that were, it was never a dictatorship again, but we still have armed groups attacking polling stations when we had elections. You had the population having to mobilize, to stop the army from when we had the coup against the elected government in 1990. At any rate, Radio Haiti covered all those events until 91. 91, we had a coup, a military coup. From 91 to 94, we were back in exile. And the station did not cover, of course, what was happening. From when we came back in 94, from 94 to 2003, we covered, of course, what was happening. And Jean had a very strong voice in terms interviews, in terms of, he interviewed everyone in Haiti and all the people who could make a difference. It didn't mean just the people who were in charge. It didn't mean people in government. It meant peasant organizations. And we have a number of those programs which are about giving a voice to people who were the excluded ones, who for 2 centuries didn't have a voice. And so this whole series is there. In 2000, Jean was assassinated. He was assassinated 6 months before an election. And, no, 1 month before senatorial and Congress election, and 6 months before a presidential election. We continued. A month later, we were back on the air after Jean was killed because we had an extraordinary team. And when I asked them, I'm sorry. When I asked them, you know what happened? Are you ready to move, to keep on doing the same thing that got Jean killed? And the answer was overwhelming. One of the journalists, I'm sorry. Okay. One of the journalists said, Michèle, you're the captain of the team, we follow you. And that's it. We started, we continued reporting, we continued until 2003. In 2003, there was, in 2002, December 2002, Christmas Day, there was an attempt on my life. My bodyguard was killed. Then after that, we could not continue to broadcast. We just felt it was too dangerous for a journalist. So in February 2003, we closed Radio Haiti. And in the meantime, the archives were there in the Radio Haiti building. And we were not on the air, but we still had a skeleton staff, and the tapes that you have here today were all there. And what we did was, after the earthquake, the building was heavily damaged, so we took out all the archives and we put them in a garage. And I think Greg is having to face this issue of the tapes that were once more abandoned in a non-air conditioning situation, and now we have those tapes. And he has a difficult task of bringing them back to life. And Patrick is hosting them, so this is, in brief, the history.
We were discussing earlier that it's kind of a miracle that these things survived in a sense, right? So, and it's also interesting in some ways, although they destroyed the radio station, they never thought to destroy the tapes.
In 1980, no, they didn't, because
the tapes have been there since, so it's kind of interesting. So it's, I mean, they're really precious, but they've kind of come to us through this whole process.
Yes, in 1980 it was just brute force. They came in on November 28, and with the butt of their weapons, they destroyed physically the studios. I mean, the consoles, everything that could broadcast, they destroyed. Our STL, the link to our antenna, everything was destroyed. But amazingly enough, the Solotech, where we kept all the documents, no one touched it. For about 6 years, people were afraid to go into the building because of what had happened to the whole team, because we were all arrested that day. And so the tapes stayed there. No one touched them. They were in the dust. And then we got back what we could. And some of it is in that, the few tapes we have already managed to clean, and I think Craig will explain the process later.
And that's how many, 2,600 tapes are estimated?
Yes.
Possibly more. And 26 boxes of paper records?
Yes, yes.
Maybe, Patrick, you can talk a little bit about the process of acquiring this and how it fits within, how you see the tapes within the project of the Human Rights Archive.
Sure.
The importance of them.
You said that I was sort of the manager of the project. It's really been such a community effort, a group of people working to bring this here, to fit in with not only our human rights collection, but so many of them have important holdings on the Haitian human rights movement. People like Holly, who is our librarian for Latin America and the Caribbean, has been a longtime advocate for growing these collections here. You were on all the other people at Rubenstein and Perkins who've been so supportive of developing the Human Rights Archive. So this, some of our most important human rights collections, such as the Washington Office in Latin America, is one of the very first large collections that we received, had a large portion of their programming, programs focused on Haiti. We also have some other collections now, including the National Coalition for Haitian Rights, which really is the link to the Radio Haiti Archives. I think a couple of years ago, Josh Nadel came in. There he is. You can all thank him, actually, for all these collections. Josh Nadel brought his class from NC Central, Latin American History course, I believe, to do research in the Washington Office on Latin America records. And as he asked me to put out some materials so that the students could see examples of the documentation. And Haiti was one of the sample areas that I chose to display. And Josh arrived, and we started talking, and we pulled out a National Coalition for Haitian Rights document. He's like, "Oh, I wrote this." And we started talking, and at some point he's like, "Would you be interested in receiving the NCHR's collections?" And I said, "Sure, let's start talking." And he put us in contact with Johnny McCullough, who was the executive director. And in some ways, that collection had a similar trajectory. It was in a garage in New Jersey, recently soaked by Hurricane Irene. Part of it was at the Schomburg Center in New York. We were able to negotiate with Johnny to bring the collection here to Duke, and that arrived maybe about a year and a half ago. And it was, maybe like a year later, I believe, Johnny sent me an email around Christmas time, asking if we'd be interested in the Radio Haiti Archives. I'm like, that sounds challenging. Audiovisual. And then I think maybe with, that same day I received the email. I happened to bump into Josh again, wandering the hallways of the Smith warehouse, and asked him, "What do you think of Radio Haiti?" And he's like, "You need to get that." And then we began this discussion with Laurent, and again, Holly was another advocate, and we had this discussion with Michèle, and quickly realized the significance of this collection for human rights, for Haiti, and how it would augment our collections here at Duke. And I think within a couple of months, we went from a discussion to the boxes flying in from Haiti to RDU, one of the fastest acquisitions I think we've ever had.
Well, actually, we had a team of former journalists at Radio Haiti who just got together and started putting things in boxes and labeling that those were not labeled. And of course, there is a tremendous amount of work to still be done on that content because a lot of them are out of context and they need to be put in context. And I think we have a lot of work ahead. Right, Laura?
But the team and Michèle did a lot of work. I mean, you described them sitting on the floor for 8 years, 6 years, but there's a lot of very rich descriptions for the material. They're actually in surprisingly good shape. And you guys moved so fast to get them to us. That was amazing. In this collection really adds to the Human Rights Archive in really important ways. You know, we're at this moment in the human rights movement where you can get a degree in human rights or a certificate, which will soon be available here. There's a sort of professionalization, NGOs and human rights activists. This really brings human rights into a different aspect of it, the role of journalism, the role of media, and sort of thinking about human rights culture. How do you disseminate that in a society, and how it connects to other human rights movements, as we were talking through in Latin America and in the Caribbean and around the world. And I think the wonderful energy of Jean Dominique can use in that collection, and that is incredibly inspiring for researchers, and I think for us who get to work with these collections, and for future scholarship and education that will come out of this collection. And it's an incredible opportunity to collaborate across departments here at Duke, across universities and globally, to ensure that the collection really is connected to the community of origins, to Haiti and the Haitian community. And I think in that way, it's not just what the archive is doing for human rights, but what human rights does for the archives. That spirit of memory and the past being part of constructing a present.
In the future.
Is so
In the
important.
future.
That accountability and accounting for. That's what memory and where memory and human rights sort of come together. So thank you, Michèle, for donating this amazing collection to do.
Well, I have to say thank you for saving it, and for because what we really are thinking about, and I think Laurent can talk about it, how we want to keep them alive, and by making them not only available to people, but Laurent, you can talk about what we want to do.
Well, I mean, I think from the beginning, certainly part of the discussion was the idea that if you think about it, this is basically a Creole and French language archive of Haitian history, of modern Haitian history. I mean, it tells, and of Haitian cultural, right? So many of the great writers are passed through these archives. Their voices are there. And this is something that can be made accessible through, I mean, because of the digital landscape we now live in, because of your gift of it, there's no limits on how this could be made accessible. It could be made accessible in a way that people can download as podcasts. People in Haiti could listen to. It could be made available to educators. In other words, this is something that could really kind of seed all kinds of activity in terms of education. And precisely because it's an audio archive, so it's something that anybody can listen to, whether they can read French or Creole, whatever, it won't limit. It can be accessible in that way. It does transmit voices in a really powerful way. It's something to hear these things is really powerful. And it has an incredible range in terms of what it actually represents, in terms of all aspects of Haitian culture. Where we might talk later about an interview with Roger Gaillard, a Haitian historian. So the depth of the collection is kind of enormous. So the challenge will be to sort of make a pitch for making these things available as they are, in French and Creole, and in some ways to make a kind of public archive of modern Haitian history that's really accessible, in whatever forms people want to use it, and then it can be used and to kind of cultivate the memory, and again generate new projects. So,
No, I think it's important to say also that these archives are important in many ways. They're important because they cover 40 years of Haitian recent history. They are important because of the range of people they touch. Giving, I mentioned earlier, giving a voice to the voiceless. Radio Haiti was the first one because we had news in Creole, because we could bring our microphones to people in the countryside, because we could broadcast to all of Haiti. We were on an AM station at the time. We happened to open a sphere that had never been opened in Haiti before. For the first time, people started first expressing themselves, then they started demanding. They started also connecting with each other, which was amazing. I mean, we could, for instance, broadcast an interview of a coffee grower in the Jérémy area, and broadcast another one from a coffee grower in Marmelade, for instance, which is another town in the north. And they would realize by listening to each other that they were being paid different prices for the coffee by the people selling the coffee. So, I think it created a revolution in a way. A slow one, but a revolution. And I think it's what is important also to say this is that there was a technological evolution at the time. We got 2 transistor radios. Small transistor radios were distributed all throughout Haiti by religious stations who wanted people to listen to the religious message. People managed to just change that. So they could listen to Radio Haiti. And at the time, this would not be possible before. For the first time, we could actually reach people because there would be one transistor radio in the village, and they would sit down around that transistor radio and listen to the news in Creole. So I think the range itself, I think, was new. It brought in, the Haitian, something that was an elitist culture before was broken in a way that people started participating in what became 1986, the overthrow of Jean-Claude Duvalier. So I think it was important in that way. I think it was also important because it went beyond Haiti. The type of struggles that you find in those archives, the type of problems peasant massacres. You have had that throughout Latin America in the 90s. You know, landowners, not accepting the fact that the peasants were asking for the land. And you had also all that was around the liberation theology. You know, priests were for a time, until the Catholic Church stopped that, but priests were for a time in that movement where the excluded were included. And that is a testimony to that period, which is common to a lot of places in the Caribbean and in Latin America. So I think it's interesting in that way. I think it's also those archives carry, you said, a passion. I would say a whole spirit, not of Jean or myself. It was a spirit not only of our team, it was a spirit of the people. And I think that's what you will find throughout those archives. They're not just stale things about, the minister of so-and-so talking about, issues as they see it. It's about people questioning the way the res publica is being treated. People just wanting to participate. And those archives are about participation. The whole history of participation, which started practically from zero and got to the point where now the journalists working today in Haiti don't even know that 40 years ago there was no such thing as news in Creole. They are all speaking Creole now. They are all opening their microphones. One thing, of course, which I haven't found recently in Haiti is that the excluded are once more excluded. You hear voices, but the voices you hear are politicians talking about politics. You don't hear very many voices coming from what in Haiti we call the pays en dehors, the outside country, meaning everybody else who has been excluded from public life for that many centuries.
Maybe we can turn now to Craig, and you can tell us about, and for some of you may have seen this, they made a very nice video that describes the process, which we can show if you'd like, but I don't know if you want to say a few words about the challenges of making this collection come back to life in a way.
Yeah, in some ways, any challenge I might face is nothing to what the tapes have faced through the years, but I think history won't be denied. And the act, I think, of recording these tapes, when you recorded them and the nature of the conditions under which you recorded them, it really reminds me of oral history, which I think in itself is kind of an act of archiving. So in some ways, it's really natural to have these tapes. It feels like a very natural process. We have a lot of energy right now at the Rubenstein Library to make sure that these tapes are preserved. And so very collaborative teams working on them. Everything from just getting a good straight inventory of the tapes and making sure that we have them ID'd correctly, and then taking them through the cleaning process. And because, yes, a lot of them do have mold on them, but in general, they're in very good shape. They sound great. And taking them from the cleaning process then to actual digitization of the tapes. It's an involved process, and we're taking our time. We're doing a pilot project to make sure that we have that we get all our steps right, and that we do everything that's right for these recordings, and to really create kind of the first step towards making them accessible, which really lies in identifying what they are and how the recordings are going then to relate to the digitized files that we have when we're done, and so that they can endure and have a long-term impact and continue to have the kind of impact that they've had before.
There's an interesting, I learned this just today, but these tapes were often, they're kind of reel-to-reel tapes that you received that would have Radio France or Dutch radio on them. So there's one track of the kind of European radio stations, and then Radio Haiti recorded on 4 other tracks. Right? So the same tape kind of back and forth will have all this material. So it's an extremely complicated process. And as Michèle yesterday said, you're kind of a magician to pull this stuff out from these things. I wanted to. Do we want to listen to one of the tapes, or we thought maybe there's an example of an interview with Roger Gaillard, for instance, just to give you a sense of the feel of what this is about. The pilot.
Let me just say first what it is. It is an interview about Roger Gaillard, who is dead now, did a series on the American occupation of Haiti. And in that series, he has different aspects of the occupation. And this interview is about a book he wrote, which was called Les 100 jours de Rosalvo Bobo, Haitian politician, at the time of the occupation. It means the 100 days of Rosalvo Bobo. And this is the interview. You won't listen to it very long. It's in French, I think. Yes.
Roger Gaillard, les 100 jours de Rosalvo Bobo. Roger Gaillard, nous en sommes au dernier round. Le Nouveau Monde vient de publier le 10e chapitre de Tes 100 jours de Rosalvo Bobo. Le moment est venu non de faire un bilan, le bilan est fait, non de tirer les enseignements, je crois que le lecteur l'a fait lui-même au fil des lignes et des chapitres, mais de tenter de te demander d'abord pourquoi ce travail et comment l'as-tu réalisé?
Eh bien, c'est un travail que j'ai réalisé dans le contexte de mes recherches sur Charlemagne-Péral. La période de l'occupation m'intéresse beaucoup. J'ai eu 7-8 ans quand j'ai vu partir les marines américains et ce départ m'avait beaucoup frappé. Et alors, j'étais hanté par cette période. Et lorsque ça a été le 50e anniversaire de la mort de Charlemagne-Péral, j'ai pensé à marquer le coup en écrivant quelque chose sur lui, je l'ai écrit. On m'a demandé de publier mon texte et au fur et à mesure où j'essayais de l'enrichir, je me suis rendu compte que pour comprendre l'insurrection de Péral, il fallait comprendre les premiers moments de l'occupation, que pour comprendre cette occupation, il fallait remonter plus haut, il fallait aller jusqu'à la période qui l'avait précédée, la période haïtienne. Et c'est ainsi que, dans le cercle de Charlemagne-Péral, j'ai été amené à approfondir l'histoire d'Haïti entre, disons,
And there are in the collection we have about 6 or 7 interviews by Roger Gaillard about his whole series. He has 6 books on the American occupation of Haiti, 1950 to 1935, and it's a mine. I mean, it's really something to explore and to get more gold out of, because there is really a lot of interesting things. Research that he did about the American occupation, which are, I think, unique. Would you say so?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's great to hear this interview because he describes how this happens, right? He wrote 1 book, and he ended up writing 6 about the U.S. occupation, but then 5 more about sort of before and after. But the kind of process of discovering this. But this is really, I mean, Haiti's kind of great 20th century historian, and to hear these kind of voices and kind of explaining the process. And I think there are lots of other examples like this. Of intellectuals, Jean Fouchard, as well as visitors. So the other interesting thing about the radio is there's like André Malraux, but other visitors who came to Haiti interviewed on the radio station and talked their perspectives on Haiti during their visits as well.
Yes, you have some very interesting things. I mean, I remember one British sociologist who came to Haiti, and he had an interview with Jean, and he said to Jean, democracy is like grass. You plant it, and then you wait for a few centuries. Like, we're not ready for democracy yet. So there are things like this which come, the views of outsiders about Haiti, which are extremely interesting in terms of comparing, realities as seen as by Haitians or realities as seen by observers from the outside. So I think that's an added dimension to those archives.
You were telling us last night about how during the conflicts in Cité Soleil, during a kind of period of great violence in that neighborhood, you were the only radio station that had the visas from gang groups to go into there.
Yes.
So there's also a lot of kind of first-hand material that's just quite.
Yeah, we do have a lot of first-hand material, and I think this is an example. At the time we had what the UN called the no-go zones. Where people were not supposed to go because people lived there. But foreigners were not supposed to go there because it was too dangerous. And most journalists did not go there. And, we actually covered the gang wars on a daily basis. At the time, it was a daily basis. In the 90s, because we had, as you said, visas. I mean, we could get in because if you identified yourself as a Radio Haiti reporter, you were in. And there are a number of radio stations that were not allowed in because people in the slum felt, that they had never been given voices, a voice on those radios. So why should they let them in? And what was interesting was that both sides of the wars, both gangs would give us access, which means that we have some material which is unique. We have, for instance, something that I was talking about last night. Right after the dictatorship fell, there were very few actual trials of people who were part of the Duvalier machine. We had one by Luc Désir, who was the head of security. We had one by Samuel Jérémy, who was also a henchman of the regime. But that's it. I mean, we were too busy trying to rebuild a country. We had the army in charge. And one episode of justice almost could have gone completely forgotten if we were not there. It was in a place called Côte de Fer. You had a group of people in a village that got together and decided to try their own macoutes. The local macoutes, the people who had actually been the repressive arm against them. So it was a fairly fair trial because the accused had the right to defend himself, Of course, it didn't last. It lasted a few days. Then after that, it was the army just closed that tribunal, that popular tribunal, which is a little bit of what we had in Rwanda in 1994, after 1994, the gachachas. So it was one experiment in Haiti, had nothing to do with Rwanda, no relationship, but where they tried to give a fair trial. There were no judges, it was just the population. And this is all what we have in the archives. It's all that is left from that experiment. And I think it's worth to keep as a historical
record.
Yes, record.
During her visit, Michèle has shared so many contextual stories. One of the things we're talking about is doing an oral history with Michèle to capture more of that.
Yes, and as you see, there is passion. Well, it was not just my passion; it was a passion of teams of journalists who were just who could go and spend 10, 15 days in a lost village just to investigate a peasant massacre that took place there. So there was passion all over, and I think I hope by making them alive again, we'll recreate that passion.
Maybe I will open it up for questions. And
Yes.
people to respond.
MacArthur PLW, I'm from Haiti, of course. And yes, I was there in 1980 when the station was closed. And as we were alluding to brute force, there's another case. They closed the station, but they forgot to take it off the air. So we could listen to the record, broken record going, and that noise went on and on and on and on. We could, with my friends, they told me, why did they close you there, Haiti? All we could listen to was the record going, that's all. And that went on for a while. So I'm a witness to that. And
They didn't know how to turn off the transmitter.
exactly. Yes. So lots of emotion listening to you talking about what you went through. But I have a question. I know the answer, but now I have to ask it anyways. Why Duke? I mean, you're taking what we have and giving it here. I know that you're not giving up on us. How are you? I know. That's not true. But can you talk to that?
Well, it was a process. I've been thinking about saving those for a long time. I was thinking about it in 2003 when we closed. But since in 2003, I was still hoping I would reopen Radio Haiti eventually. So I didn't think of actually, giving them to any place actually. And then more recently, I've been thinking, something has to be done. After the tapes were transported to my garage, I felt that we were going to lose them. And, I got into, I talked to Johnny McCalla, as Patrick said, and Johnny said, well, I gave my archives to Duke. You should think about that. I had, in the meantime, read Laurent's books. And I said, well, that sounds like a place that would be welcoming Haiti. And that's when we got in touch, and then we started talking, and, Patrick had 20 questions for me, and I had to answer all of them in detail. And it's, this is the best decision I have taken in a long time. To me, Duke is the best place for them to be, and all of us agree on one thing. The end result has to be the fact that those archives will be available to the public. And this is called Forum in Publics. And the idea is that anybody in Haiti could have access to them. Right now, there are still radio stations in Haiti, yesterday, that are broadcasting Jean's programs, particularly his interviews. And I was called yesterday by a radio station. They made me listen to Jean's voice over the radio. They still air his editorials. Every 3rd of April, we have special commemoration in other radio stations about who Jean Dominique was, about what the station represented. And to me, it's really a great choice that I made. We made together. It's a partnership.
I was going to say that from the Duke side, we also, so when we first approached this, it was a little bit, shocking, challenging. But I think we realized in discussion with you that this was the right place for such a collection. It was the right intellectual environment. And also we had the right expertise required for something as complex as this.
I have to say, I was really impressed this morning when I saw the work being done.
Joseph Jones, my friend MacArthur, I asked you this question, why did you give it to Duke University? But yesterday when he called me and he said that he's coming here, I said, let me take a day off because I'm interested in listening to you and to see you. Because what you're talking about, it covers a part of my life. And I was part of the regime, but I was in, but I was walking out. And I remember when I used to go to my office and I used to listen to Radio Haiti at noon, and sometimes we trying to cover to listen to the radio while I was in service because I'm from the second promotion of Jean-Claude Duvalier from the Academy. And really, I left Haiti in 1981. So I lost that segment of my life. So really, I was pushed out and I stayed out for 20 years. I could not return to Haiti because they were searching for me. I could not return to Haiti. So when I heard that you coming and giving that material to Duke, I said, that's my time. I'm going to learn about the history of Haiti during that time. I think it's a good choice, and I thank you for giving them to Duke.
I do think it's it's I said yesterday it's a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One more question: when this will become available?
We hear this. I think we had this discussion this morning, and part of it is that it is a pretty massive technical project.
Yes,
and it includes a lot of people. So I think everybody's invested.
How many hours did you say, Greg?
About a round number, about 5,500 hours.
Wow. 5,500 hours. But you can release it piecewise.
Right. But no, I should say. I mean, so they have already digitized 10 tapes, and I think part of the project will be to prioritize. Michèle will be working to figure out are there particular shows, really remarkable ones, and we can work to prioritize those and begin to make them available. So the idea is not to wait until every single thing is done, but rather to begin to offer to people what is available as it comes. So yeah.
I'm really happy that you have donated this archive to Duke. I have an archival story about Haiti. I actually had to change my dissertation topic because I wasn't able to access the Marie Boucher private papers.
Mm-hmm.
I literally had to change topic because of that. And so I really recognize the value of actually knowing where the Radio Haiti is. And so as someone who has written in Haitian Creole, I remember a few years ago speaking about you with my dissertation advisor. So where do you think I can get the Radio Haiti archive? Because I would love to integrate Radio Haiti more into the history of Creole that I was writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm extremely thankful. I do notice that the last time I was in Haiti, I spoke to Jean-Claude Duvalier, and he was actually collecting papers in Port-au-Prince. He was specifically there for a trip collecting papers because archivists at Boston University were going to pick up those papers to bring them to Boston University. And I was just thinking, wow, things are changing, and of course it's great to have papers and archives in Haiti as for patrimony, but it's actually just really hard for a historian to do 20th century Haiti and access sources in Haiti. So it's actually, I'm actually the last person to advertise to even a lot of Haitian papers in the U.S. But just having gone through the difficulty, I'm still thankful that some will be here, some will be at BU, and that the 20th century Haiti can actually be written, because I have often felt like the history is not written. What 20th century of modern Haiti and Haiti exists if you can't really read a very good book on Jean Dominique and your work in political participation in Haiti. And I'm going to mention political participation because I found it very interesting that you mentioned that word. Because I kind of think that you actually already started a narrative of how this period should be written about, and what to look for in this particular archive. Because when one thinks about Haiti, especially during the Zivale dictatorship, and afterwards, it's hard to think that Haiti political participation. When has there ever been political participation in Haiti? And you're suggesting that even before the democratic movement, that Port Aristide, there are moments in which we can actually look at political participation. So I'm really glad to see that a history like that can actually be written by Haiti. That's not just about dictatorship and sensational histories, but to say that look at this special moment, look at Michèle, look at Jean Dominique, and look what they did. So thank you.
I have to say something else, in answer to your question, not your question, to what you said, in answer also to your question. Why didn't I choose a Haitian institution to give those tapes to? Because there are none. And I think as a people, we are struck with amnesia because there are no institutions to nurture memory. So, to me, to save those tapes, meant essentially come to a place like Duke that has, first welcomes us and also has the capability of keeping that memory alive. And we have to realize that we are a country that went through an earthquake in 2010. Whatever places of memory we had are gone. I remember when I was working in the 90s, every time there was an overthrow of one military regime, you had people would bring archives to us after they had raided an office. Those things end up in the streets. They are not collected. We have a national archives that really, does not quite meet the needs here.
I think we can start one.
We can start one. Well, we have one theoretically, but we can start one. But in the meantime, we have tapes that spend how many years on the floor and in the dust, and we don't have any institution that can actually make them alive, give them life, and Duke does that.
Well, I'll just say, I think what was always exciting about this collection, because of the digital possibilities, once these things are openly available, if institutions in Haiti can have a computer and have it, they can circulate, they can live wherever they want to live in some ways, right? Or where people want to make them live. So, there was a question back there.
Yeah. as Haitian living in the Triangle community, I'm glad you donated to Duke, and I'm also glad that Duke is going to make it available to the public, the young ones, as I would love for my child to learn about Haiti. I grew up listening to Radio Haiti, so it is a good thing. But my questions to you is, we are in 2014. Do you still feel like there is the same type of being scared all the time in the Jean Dominique era? Do you still feel like journalists face that same fear? Because this is the thing, I was in Haiti less than a month ago. Although it was during the period of the carnival, people were free to say certain things, but there was still that fear. You can say this, you know. I just want to know, when is it ever going to be really democratic to the point that the people, whether or not you live in Haiti or you don't live in Haiti, can just say things on the freedom of speech?
Well,
You know,
I'd
if
say-
there is such thing.
Yeah, I'd say that the press is pretty free. I think they say quite a bit. I think total freedom doesn't exist anywhere. You know, I mean, there are limitations in all democratic societies. There are limitations, you know, to respect privacy. There are different limitations that exist. But, you know, the press is quite open, quite free in Haiti. The only question I have about the Haitian press today is that it is back to just first, not going in depth into Haitian realities. And the second issue, it covers essentially what we call the Republic of Port-au-Prince, which means what is happening in the political sphere, this is what people in the press cover. And I think it's a shame. It has nothing to do with freedom of the press. I don't think I have felt fear in Haiti after 1986. Of course, you know, the military came, they shot at Radio Haiti several times. We had a grenade that had a big hole in our, the facade of Radio Haiti. But I don't think we were ever afraid, as we were, let's say we were very cautious during the dictatorship. We knew that we exercised, of course, a tremendous amount of self-censorship. But personally, the only time I felt fear in Haiti is when I became a plaintiff in the Jean-Claude Duvalier case. Then I called people who had been political prisoners. You know, people who had lost kids or husband, and then I felt fear returning. It was just, people who says, Michèle, don't ask us to testify. You know, we don't want to relive that time. But at the same time, you know, now a year later, people are starting to speak out about what happened. So I think the press is pretty free myself. I think people say what they think. Of course, there are issues. Right now, there is the present government, you know, will interdict some carnival groups from playing in the carnival. But I don't think that's can be compared to what we lived through for so many years. So I personally, I don't think it's the case.
Yeah, but if that is the case, why can the group that you worked with in the past, why can't they reopen something just so that the focus can be on the outside?
Okay, well, I see what, yeah.
Because this is something that's missing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, the people, I mean, I didn't grow up in Port-au-Prince, and thank God, okay, but that doesn't mean that I did not have access to listen to something.
Yes.
So the people in Jacmel, the people in Okap, the people in the countryside, they are still missing, their voices are missing, basically.
Yeah, well, it's true in a way, but But at the same time, you know, they have myriad. I mean, you have 70 radio stations, you know. So they are bombarded with radio stations and with maybe not the right information, but a lot of information. A lot of it superficial. But I think it's linked to the fact that most of the media are privately owned. Jean Dominique made a choice. His choice was, you know, this is the way this station is going to be. So we would, for instance, give, pay for a reporter to spend 15 days in Maïsad, in the middle of the country, because we thought there were stories there. I would come into the newsroom and I'd say, what do we have today? It was in the early morning. What do we have today? And someone said, we have a story here, we have a story there, and I would say, give me a headline on the outside country. Okay? That meant what? It meant that the station had to, assign resources for the reporter to do that work, and to do it in depth. I think it was a choice which very few commercial stations will make, because the people who are actually paying for advertisement are not interested. They're interested in consumers. And the people who consume the most, are the people from more or less the upper middle class, the elite. And of course, they are still selling soap that everybody buys. But at the same time, I don't think the type of coverage we had was a priority for the people who were actually, putting their money and their advertisement money into radio.
It's like it's more a business than a vocation.
It is. It is.
It's so great to see you here today. My generation, I left Haiti in '82. So every night before I left Haiti, my family would get around the radio station, listening to Radio Haiti every night.
Yes.
So that's it's great. I've been following you a little bit. I've tried to read whatever you're involved in, and I'm wondering today you said there are 70 radio stations in Haiti today, and in your opinion, if you could provide an opinion about 2 or 3 that were inspired because of and your work, and then in terms of true voices of the people. The lady spoke about the fact that the countryside has no voice. I worked way in the countryside, in Benin, way beyond. There's one radio station that reaches the area. We also put a radio station in the community called a community radio station, who have a voice. I'm wondering today if you could give 2 or 3 examples of radio stations in Haiti that may touch a little bit what Radio Haiti did 30 years ago.
Well, you mentioned the community radios. The community radios really came of age in the last, I would say, 10, 15 years. And this is an amazing development. Why? Because when AM was abandoned and replaced by FM stations, only a few stations had the ability to create relays and be able to actually broadcast outside of Port-au-Prince. So, or outside of the big cities. I mean, outside of Cape Haitian, you have a radio station in Cape Haitian that doesn't go beyond, the limits of Barrière-Bouteille. So, there are limitations linked to technical and, because right now it's very inexpensive to set up an FM radio station. And most of those 70 radio stations, practically all of them are FM stations. So I think the community, I would answer not by citing specific radios, but by telling you, the whole community radio, the whole, they are linked they have an association of all those community radios, and they do great work in terms of participation at a local level, in terms of people expressing themselves at a local level. Of course, they have very little range. They don't go beyond that range. By creating a network, they have managed to use each other's material, and that is an interesting thing, which hopefully they'll have archives that they will give a Duke eventually.
Get ready.
And to me, this is really, those are new resources, those are new possibilities. There are very few national radios that do that. That's why I'm not going to quote any of them. Sure. Some of my former reporters have created a radio station, Radio Kiskeya. They do have some of the concerns that we had. I don't know whether they go as far as we go in terms of covering what I call the outside country.
For all my life, I left Haiti 32 years ago, and I'm still hope beyond hope for Radio Haiti. Even though Radio Haiti will never be, but still, that's part of my formation, and then my teachers my school was a target. My professors spent time in jail in Haiti. So when I was going to school, I was telling my daughter yesterday about Jean Dominique. She actually went to Duke here. She left 2 years ago. So I was telling her about Jean Dominique, her history about Jean Dominique and Michèle. And so I look and then wish and hope and dream for Radio Haiti. And it's hoping beyond hope.
Well, it just gets back to your radio. Why didn't the people who were left? Why didn't they create another radio station? First, when we left, we knew there were reasons why they came and they had the second attempt on my life, and we knew that what they wanted was to shut down Radio Haiti because of what we represented, because also we were advocating. We wanted justice for Jean Dominique, okay, and it was a daily thing, I mean, we would not just give up. And I think that's, we never went through a real investigation, but we realized that it was not the time to keep on doing what we were doing. And the people working for Radio Haiti, some of them are with the community radios, some of them are doing other things in media, but they are not in charge of a radio station, which had specific choices.
For the next decade, where do you see yourself?
As passionately involved about Haitian matters as I am today. Where do I see myself? Not very different, hoping to get some results on my struggles. That's, it's a day-by-day thing. We're talking yesterday about, Sisyphus pushing the rock on top of the mountain and getting to enjoy the rock. You know it's fall down, but you still push it. And I think it's my life. I think I learned from Sisyphus.
Question back there.
Well, first I want to say how amazing it is to be in the same room as you. Growing up as a Haitian American in Brooklyn, my parents always told us about Haiti, and Jean Dominique and Michèle Montas were a huge part of that. Partially because my father was a political prisoner for 2 years, Henri Faustin. And so when your segue earlier, the comment you made about your fear coming back when you were called to be a plaintiff for Jean-Claude Duvalier trial and calling people up, he was one of the few who agreed to testify. So he wanted me to ask you today. When I told him this was happening, my whole family was like, "Oh my God!" So he wanted me to ask you if you think that there will ever be. He attended the Jean-Claude Duvalier trial, the short thing that happened not too long ago, and he asked if you ever think there will be justice for those that were political prisoners like himself.
Yes, I know he's a plaintiff. So we're on the same boat together. There are 29 of us. Which is little compared to how much impact the dictatorship had on Haiti. But I have to say, I'm hopeful. I actually was, at the very beginning, we were 4 people sitting down at my house and having coffee and discussing how to do it. And the phone calls we were making were not getting anywhere. Well, now we have not only, the case went from an instructing judge who said no reason to judge Jean-Claude Duvalier for anything other than economic crimes, which in Haitian law is a misdemeanor. You get 3 years in jail, and again, But, the fact that now an appellate court has decided that he can be judged, he can be tried. Duvalier can be tried for violations of human rights and crimes against humanity. And for the first time, a panel of judges decided, which is something that exists in all those countries who have been trying their former dictators, that international law and the international conventions that Haiti signed are above and are part of Haitian law. So, for the first time this was recognized. To me, it's a huge thing. So tell your father that I think there is hope. I don't know how far the process will go, but again, it's the Sisyphus thing. you do it, and then you hope for the best, but you keep on doing it. I think we have gone a long ways. We didn't think we would be here at this time. It's just thinking about trying Duvalier. It's going to be a long process. Right now, his lawyers have gone to the higher court, and we don't know what the outcome will be. But there is still a judge from the appellate court who is continuing with the investigation of what happened. And that's why archives matter a lot, because there is, it has been 25 years since Jean-Claude Duvalier left. It was more. He came back after 25 years, but there are troves of documents which we can get, and we were. I have to say, our group was represented at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights last week, and we testified, and we said one of our requests to the Commission was that other governments, other people who have archives, give us proof, give us material that can help us prosecute Duvalier. And it's not just Duvalier. What happened, for instance, in the Fujimori case in Peru, is that they tried Fujimori, actually on 3 different trials, but they just tried Fujimori. The suit we have right now, our plate goes beyond Duvalier himself. It's about all the people who kept the system going after François Duvalier died, and who were the repressive arm of the regime. So to me, it's what we call the consort, which means the accomplices of what happened, is as important as Jean-Claude Duvalier himself. It's like the Fujimori case. I was saying that yesterday. People are saying, well, they got the cherry on the cake, they didn't get the cake. So I think it's a continuing effort. And tell you that courage.
Since the topic came up, I'm interested in just talking about the positive side and some of the successes of the National Archives at Port-au-Prince, the historic section, mainly because their materials and their work really helped me out a lot in my career. There's the horror stories. The most prominent horror story seems to be that in the 50s maybe, when the Rochambeau materials came up to Sotheby's and the University of Florida purchased most of the Rochambeau materials, maybe the state of Haiti purchased the subsection, which maybe since has vanished or vaporized. Luckily, there was part of that preserved on microfilm. So there's many horror stories and this and that and the bad aspects of this or that or the other. But upon first arriving there, initially, what they started doing, they showed me the original 1826 Code Boyer, Code Rural of Boyer, and they would start showing me handwritten personal dispatches of Pétion. And then after months and months of difficulty in getting through things, it would seem that their holdings in the early 19th century are very encouraging, very interesting, and very untouched. And so I think on the one hand, especially with digital materials that maybe require a special kind of care, it's not such a tragedy to see those leave the country to be preserved. But as far as I think paper items, which hold more kind of antiquarian importance, I could envision that in my lifetime, this institution, the National Archives at Post-Marchand, could be the kind of destination for repatriation of documents that may best belong to the Haitian state that are in European or North American collections now.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Yes, I think it's important. It's interesting. I haven't been to the National Archives for a little while. I do know that we were trying to get the archives that were returned by the U.S. Army from there were archives of the Army, which were taken at the same time as the archives of the FRAP, which was a paramilitary group, and they were taken outside of the country. They were, most of it was repatriated to Haiti, and now they are in boxes, and nothing has been done about them. Of course, a lot of the material is redacted. I mean, the U.S. Army took out, the CIA took out a number of things which really involve their own implication. So, but I know that those boxes are there and they haven't been really treated and studied. So to me, I do see I'm glad you brought the positive aspects, but there are tremendous limitations.
Well, I think we're going to end now. We usually end at about 1:20. And I'll invite you to continue. Do you want to have one final question?
It's just a thought. I think, Laurent, you referred to history coming alive. And I think history comes alive when folks understand the context of the bits and pieces. And I think too often, particularly maybe in the United States, we're taught the bits and pieces, but not the context. We know that our Constitution was amended 10 times before it was ratified. Most Americans don't understand the context of any of those amendments. What a wonderful opportunity it would be if, Laurent, you could interview Michèle about each one of these pieces, so we understand the context. Yeah, you're all your spare time. That we could understand the context in which this occurs. It's a unique opportunity to bring history alive.
You're right, and we have been talking about that.
I already offered her a job.
Craig offered her a job immediately.
Starting this afternoon.
So now the question, what are you going to do for the next 10 years? You're going to work in the Duke Library. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for the panel, and thank you all for those of you who came and shared stories and participated in this great event. So it's really wonderful, and we look forward to more collaborations and working together.
Yes, great. Thank you.